our study on love, and that's from John, the 7th chapter. Who'd like to read about 4 verses? John chapter 7, verses 14 to 18. That's just 5 verses, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, 5 verses. Got a reader who wants to go for it? And remember, it's New Testament, so there aren't that many big words. All right. Thank you, Roy. John 7, 14 to 18.
How did this man get such learning without having studied? Jesus answered, my teaching is not of my own. It comes from him who sent me. If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. He who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself, but he who works for the honor of the one who sent him is a man of the truth. There is nothing false about it.
Very good. Thank you, Roy. If you pay special attention to verse 17, what does this teach us about the things God teaches us to do? What's that? Choice, yes. We have a choice. We can choose to do what God teaches us to do or not to do, which when you think about that, isn't that pretty profound? When you look at the universe, you stand outside at night and you look up into the endless expanse, everything up there does exactly as God demands it do. Every planet rotates in its orbit. Every moon around every planet rotates around that planet. Every galaxy, everything does exactly what God teaches it to do. It's man that he gives the ability to choose yes or no. What else does this verse 17 teach us about doing God's will? How will you know? When he says, when you do it, you will discover, it will become clear to you, plain to you, that this is the Word of God. To me, what that means is, if I commit myself in faith to do what it says, because that's what this class is about, studying things that God teaches us to actively do. A lot of things we know we're supposed to believe, a lot of things we know we want to think, but things we're supposed to do, Jesus is saying here, if you do the things that I'm teaching, you'll discover in the doing of those things that it is from God, because you're going to have one of these aha moments. Some people call them God moments, where you go, oh wow, had to be God, couldn't be anybody else. Now you might not be able to prove it. You don't have any extemporaneous evidence, anything that a forensic science couldn't take and use in a court of law, but you will know, Jesus says, when you do these things, that they are of God. Now, back to our discussion on love that we got started in last week. Anybody have any observations or comments, any questions from last week's class? Anything at all? I've got a few questions. How many different words are there in the Koine Greek language for love? 4. Somebody name one of them. Oh, that's the easy one. Agape, phileo, sterge. What's sterge? Familial, brotherly love. Now, sometimes we'll get phileo mixed up with the brotherly love because we've got Philadelphia. But Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love because it's phileo adelphos. Adelphos is a Greek word for brother. That's why that affectionate love tied with the brother is brotherly affection. Have you noticed that not all brothers have affection? But they usually have love. You pick on one brother who's been beating on his brother all day long. You pick on the brother that he's been picking on, and what's going to happen? You're going to get it from the brother that's been picking on that brother all day long, because there's a tie that we have as family members that we don't have with anybody else. It's interesting, too. When you're trying to accomplish something and things aren't going right, you might lose your patience about the whole thing But typically, if it's somebody who's not a family member, you'll still be nice. Oh, I know this isn't going very well, is it? This is just really rough. Isn't this difficult? If it's a family member, what's wrong with you? How come you didn't do that straight? I don't know. Because that's the way we are towards family members. We treat them different because there's a different kind of love, a different relationship. So we got agape, we got phileo, and what's the fourth one? Eros, which is erotic love, which is only bad if you're doing it with somebody besides your husband or your wife. Erotic love is part of God's plan in marriage. So there's nothing wrong with erotic love as long as you keep it in its proper context, which is true for almost every behavior we've got. Now, define phileo. Affection, warm affection. You feel a sense of affection for somebody else. That's what phileo is. Define agape. You seek the other person's highest good, regardless of feelings. You may have feelings for them that are affectionate, but you may not. You just may know, I'm supposed to do good, and so I'm going to do good. Now, here's where it comes in what we were talking about last week from Luke chapter 10, actually, Luke chapter 10. It was Matthew 22, but it's Luke chapter 10. So if you go to Luke 10, pull this all back in and put it in proper scriptural context. In Luke chapter 10, starting at verse 25, a lawyer stood up and asked Jesus about the greatest teaching in the law, and he did that to test him. But Jesus turned it around and said, okay, how does it read in the law? How does it read to you? What does the law say? How does it read to you? And the guy answered in verse 27, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and body, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said in verse 28, well, what did he say in verse 28? Do this. Do this. Don't think this. Don't believe this. Do this. It has to be done. The love part is something that must be done by us. But if we do that, what does he say will be the result? You will live. I believe that really means live in two different ways. What would one of those ways be? Eternally. You do this. You love God with all your heart, mind, soul, body, being, and you let neighbor as yourself. You're going to live for eternity. What's the other way? You'll have a good life. You really will live life. Some people get in such a mess in their lives, they say, well, this isn't like living at all. This is just going through torture. This is torment. This isn't like living. And then other people will say, man, we're really living now. But the way to truly live a rewarding, fulfilling kind of life is to keep God's commandments, to do the things that he teaches us to do. Now, with all that being said, what's the next question the guy asked Jesus? Who's my neighbor? Why did he ask that? His intention was to limit those that he had to love. That was his whole point. I don't want to love everybody, so let's draw the circle as small as we can. Now, who's my neighbor? What do you suppose this guy had not been doing? Loving his neighbor the way he was supposed to. So Jesus does the very thing that would nail down the point that everybody is our neighbor if they are someone in need. How does he do that? Is it a parable? Could be a real story. I believe it is a real story. I think he's telling them something that he knows happened. Could it be a parable? I suppose it could be, but I don't know that this is something that didn't happen. I'm more inclined to believe it did. Now, who's the hero? A Samaritan. Why is that significant? They were the lowest of the low. They weren't just Gentiles, they were half-breeds. What did Cher tell us? Half-breed, that's all I ever heard. Half-breed, how I learned to hate the word. I know, hey, I'm a child of the 60s. I got a tattoo of a butterfly on my back, so. Oh, yeah, exactly. Because that's the way half-breeds were treated exactly. This was even worse. Because the Jews, many of them, not all of them, but they had a mentality of, we are the people of God and you're not. And so it's even worse when you were the people of God and you mingled with the Gentiles, and now you're not. That's even lower than Gentiles as far as they're concerned. So Jesus is pulling in the Samaritans, and because the Jews didn't like them, the Samaritans reciprocated in typical human fashion. Samaritans didn't like them either. Do you remember when Jesus was passing through Samaria and he was going to Jerusalem as he was passing through? By the way, what was he going to Jerusalem to do? You recall that context? This was his final trip to Jerusalem. He was going to Jerusalem to die. And when he got to Samaria, the Samaritans said, oh, you're not passing through here. We don't want you in our country because you're going up to Jerusalem. What did his apostles want to do? They had read about Elijah, who called fire down from heaven and wiped out 100 emissaries of the king. There was a 50-cent fire came down from heaven because Elijah asked for it. Another 50 was sent, fire came down from heaven. Another 50 was sent, and this captain of the 50 basically crawled up to Elijah and said, oh man, please, I got to come from the king. Please come with us and go to the king. The other guys just stepped up and demanded a. So they read that. They've got this in mind. Oh Lord, should we call down fire like Elijah and consume these people? What did Jesus say? He said, what we need to hear in regard to this lesson, he said, you do not know what spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. How did Jesus behave towards the Samaritans? Kindness, in this context, we would say in a loving fashion. Yes, just like the woman at the well. He didn't make any distinction between her and any other human being. He was sitting at the well. She came out to draw water. He was thirsty. He said, hey, would you give me a drink of water? Exactly, because she knew their relationship, and Jesus knew their relationship. That's why he tells this story, to make the point. It's not about loving the people that love you back. Don't we do that on just a natural? We don't need to be taught to do that. Well, maybe some of us do. But for the most part, Jesus made the point, and we understand it. Anybody will love those who reciprocate that love. But Jesus says, I want you to love your enemies. And we'll read later where he says, that's how we show ourselves to be children of God. See, we come here and we see each other, and it's so easy for us to love each other because we're all so lovable. We know we share, without a few exceptions, just, you know what I'm saying. We share kindred spirits. We have the common faith. We believe in Jesus Christ and one another, and we know that we are in the church and of the kingdom. We know we have an inheritance. All these things come together, and we care about each other. But how about the people who are demanding that a statue of Satan be built on the grounds of our Capitol building? Should we love them? I'm not saying should we allow them to build their statue. Should we care about them? Have a warm feeling of affection? That might be pretty hard, but Jesus didn't command us. Isn't this interesting? Jesus never commanded phileo. The only kind of love he's ever commanded is agape. Because agape is the kind of love you can do without it being connected to emotion. Love. Love your neighbor as yourself, but also love your enemies. So Jesus is telling this story about the Samaritan. Who are the two people who pass by and don't help the Samaritan? The priest and the Levite. Two people that you would expect, oh, these guys are leaders in the religion of the Jews, in God's religion, and they don't do anything. But the one who does something was the Samaritan. You know, that had to just eat at the guys who were listening to this story being told. Oh, great, he's making the Samaritan out to be the good guy. Well, probably happened. It's probably exactly the way it happened. Who are the ones who gave Jesus the hardest time? the priests and the Levites, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the scribes, the lawyers. But this Samaritan comes along, and if you look at verse 33, he came upon him, and when he saw him, what happened inside the Samaritan? He felt compassion, he took pity. There was something inside this man that was, and I hesitate to use this word because sometimes it's put in the wrong context, but there was something inside this man that was sensitive to what had happened to this other guy. He sensed it. He understood the pain, the difficulty, the trial that this guy was under, and the need that he had, and the desperation, and the hopelessness if nobody would help him. He understood that. It's kind of like, how many of you like to listen to the radio in your car? You're driving down the road and you got your radio on, and it's a really good song. Oh, you love this song that's on here. Maybe it's Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road. Everybody loves that song. I'll sing it for you. No, I won't. But it's a song you really like, you really enjoy, but all of a sudden you're just out of radio range, and it's in and it's out, and it's fading and it's static, and it drives you nuts. But if your radio's working right and you're in range, you're pulling in that signal, and you can hear it loud and clear. This guy was pulling in the signal. He was wide open. His heart was wide open. He saw his neighbor in need, and he felt compassion, and he did what God would have him do. He helped the guy. He did what he could. Bandaged up his wounds in verse 34, pouring oil and wine on them, put him on his own beast, brought him to an inn, took care of him. Next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him. Whatever more you spend, when I return, I'll repay you. So it's time. He's stopping, taking time, because he's on a journey too, but he's stopping and taking time to help this guy. He uses his resources, oil and wine, his beast, his donkey, his money, and he's not only doing those things, but he is obligating himself for further help. Billy? It might be. That's right. Sympathy is one thing, but what's the other word that's a little bit better than sympathy? Empathy. What's empathy? You really understand because you've been there. You've gone through the same thing. Sympathizing with someone is all you can do when you've never gone through what they're going through. But if you've gone through something similar, then you can empathize. This is a lesson we need to learn when bad things happen to us, when we're made uncomfortable, and we tend to have a negative response to the discomfort in our lives or the injustices in our lives. We can take that up and say, okay, what do I need to learn from this? Because I'm sure you'll agree with me that every situation in life is one from which we can learn. If this happened to me, I don't ever want to be responsible for causing this kind of pain to someone else. Who was I talking to just recently? And the phrase came up, hurt people hurt people. If you've been hurt yourself, there's a human tendency to turn around and hurt somebody else in the same way. It's almost like, even if it's not the same person that hurt you, if you can hurt somebody in the same way, okay, now you've got justice. It's twisted thinking, but that is the way we think sometimes. It's like when you get an injury and you're in pain and you want to just hit something. Or you're angry and you want to hit, and you don't always want to hit something. Well, you do want to hit something that's responsible for your pain or someone. But any substitute will do. We're just like that. Exactly. And How many times do we see this cycle in a family, perhaps? Somebody had a bad upbringing, and so they're going to give their kids a bad upbringing, and their kids are going to give their kids a bad upbringing. They're just going to be mean and ugly and hateful because my dad was mean and ugly and hateful to me, and his grandpa was mean and ugly and hateful to him. Somewhere along the way, somebody has to say, I'm stopping this. Bonnie? Right. And if you could put that in a bottle or a pill form to make sure that everybody got that, but this is one of the great mysteries of life. Why does some people get it and other people don't? I'm asking myself that question all the time. Faith is the same thing. Why do some people have faith and other people don't? Well, it's because they've seen in Scripture that, well, yeah, but people who don't believe have seen the same things in Scripture that I've seen. There's something about some folks, they're not going to believe. Other folks are going to believe. Some folks are going to decide, I'm looking at this and I have to do something about this. Other folks won't. There's a mystery there. But you and I, if we are open and receptive, we can decide, I'm changing this. It's not going to be this way for me. And it could be anything that's negative. Questions, comments, observations? Yes.
In that context, it's kind of like the condition of the soil. And so it would lead me to think that I need to be praying about the condition of my heart, and that the conditions, the type of soil that I am, that I would be the type that God's word grows and not be choked out.
Right. Wouldn't it be wonderful if in that parable, at the end of that parable, Jesus said, now here's how you can go out and talk to somebody and turn them into good soil. Anybody know that passage? It's not in there. If it were there, if it were possible, it would be there. Because there's no guarantee. Jesus was God, Son of God. Nobody wiser, nobody smarter, nobody more insightful into the ways of man's thinking. And he did not convert very many. So when we go out into the world and we practice this, we do these things, just like Jesus said, do this and you'll live. We're going to do it for people who don't appreciate it. We're going to do it for people who are going to turn around and slap us in the face. We're going to do it for people who are going to be ungrateful. So what are we going to do? Do it anyway. And here's the thing. What's the first commandment? Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and body. Second commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. Yes, love your neighbor as yourself. Which the implication is you got to love yourself. It's interesting, that's not a commandment, but it's implied in the commandment. Well, here's the deal. I know a lot of people that are hard to love. But if I think first about my love for God, okay, God, I know you want me to do this for them, so I'm going to do this for them, even though I'd really like to shoot them in the head. I'm going to do this for them because you've said this is what I'm supposed to do. Somebody slaps you in the face. What does Jesus say to do? Turn the other cheek. What are we going to do? We're going to do what we want to do, or are we going to do what God says? If we love God, even though we may not feel like it, if we love him enough, we'll do it. See, this is how faith and love are so integral to one another. You can't have faith without love. You can't have love without faith. They're just part and parcel. They go hand in hand. That's the way it works. Now, hold on to Luke chapter 10 here and go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, everybody knows, because that's the chapter about love. Yeah. Now, incidentally, Always like to look at a context. Do you notice what chapter 12 is about? And you don't have to read too far in chapter 12 to see what chapter 12 is about. And you can even read the heading if you've got one. Chapter 12 is about the use of spiritual gifts, and actually it's miraculous spiritual gifts in the church. Chapter 14, what's chapter 14 about? Same thing. He comes back to miraculous spiritual gifts. Look at the end of chapter 12. What does he say in verse 31? Earnestly desire the greater gifts. Greater what gifts? The greater miraculous gifts. Because at that time, God was giving those things to members of the church, and he was saying, here's how you use those in the church. And some of them are greater. Desire the greatest ones. But, what's the last word? What's the last line in chapter 12? I want to show you a more excellent way. And what's he talk about? Right after that. Love. I can't do anything miraculous, but I can love exactly as Paul writes about it here in 1 Corinthians 13. I can do that. And he's not telling us to have any kind of feelings. He's saying this is the way love behaves. He first says in verse 1, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels but do not have love, I become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. In other words, if I don't care, I'll do it, but I don't care. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all my possessions to feed the poor, boy, what a sacrifice that might seem to us because we live in such a materialistic society. Give up everything you've got to feed the poor. What a sacrifice. But if you don't have love, what's it amount to? Nothing. If you don't care, it amounts to nothing. Love is patient. Love is, it is not. You see all these behaviors? These are behaviors. Love practices patience. Love practices kindness. Love does not do jealousy. Love does not brag. It is not arrogant. It doesn't act unbecomingly. It doesn't seek its own. Have you ever heard someone teach a class or preach a sermon, and they say, in the place of love, insert your own name? Oh, that's pretty good. Now, it would read like this for me. Marty is patient. Marty is kind. Marty is not jealous. Marty does not brag. Marty is not arrogant. Marty does not act unbecomingly. Now, how far would you have to go through that list before you'd say, I'm lying? It's a pretty, yeah. That's as far as you have to go. That's all right. I know, we all know you're sorry. But I love you. The Bible says I have to. It's agape, yeah. I agape you. Yeah. We better move on. The end of verse 5. This is interesting. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. What's that mean? Doesn't hold a grudge, doesn't keep tabs. Boy, this is, yeah, you don't resent things because I'm holding on to this. I'm going to resent this for a long time. Because there's some sense of twisted pleasure we as human beings think we get from holding on to an injustice because it gives us some kind of twisted concept of power against somebody else. And if I forgive them of this, and I won't have that against them anymore, man, well, who are you holding prisoner with that? Yourself. Yourself. Yes, it is like scratching on a spiritual scab. By the way, who's the real judge anyway? God. Let him handle it. If somebody needs to be punished, who can do a better job, me or him? Yes. Exactly. And there's a lot of stuff right there that are very specific as to how to love people. And then, right after we finish all that stuff at the end of Romans 12, the first part of chapter 13 is about submitting to the government. And you might think, well, what does that have to do with each other? Well, all of this love is submission. You can't love people unless you're willing to submit yourself to do that. Because what is agape love? How is it defined? seek another's highest good. What would I rather do? Seek my own highest good. Because I've only got so much time and resources, and if I spend it seeking somebody else's highest good, I don't have that time and resource for myself. No. Why do you think God tells us eternity? We're not going to give up any time here that's not going to be paid back. And eternity is not time. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's way beyond time. But God says, I'm going to bring you to live with me for eternity. So don't worry about how much time you're going to give up. Matter of fact, Paul writes and he says, redeem the time. Why? Because the days are evil. How do you redeem time? You do this stuff. That's why we're studying things God says to do. So we can redeem our time, buy it back, use it wisely and in such a way that impacts other people who are in such need. Think about the people who have impacted your life in a positive way. What if they had thought, oh, I don't have time for you, or I don't care about you? I mean, there's a lot of people in my life, I don't think I'd be here anymore. I really think I'm alive today because of my mom's prayers. There's situations I've been in. I wonder how I made it out of that. Stupid.